Well, happy New Year's, everyone. Josh of Severe Weather. I hope everybody's excited about a new year coming. Changing up the look here, moving forward with Josh of Severe Weather. But big story coming up here is a major outbreak of cold coming for January. Now, I know some of you have said, well, it's supposed to be cold. It's wintertime. And yes, that's true. But this will be a pretty notable cold wave, colder air than we've seen in several years for many in parts of the east and especially the southeastern United States. And the setup is starting to look a little bit better for winter weather to come farther south than it has over the last few winters. Now, obviously, there's some time for things to change here. The forecasts are still a bit uncertain, but I'm going to try to do my best here to kind of break down how things are going to be here over the next several days. Mild air still in place here. We had 90s as high as 99 in deep South Texas yesterday afternoon, an all-time December record for the U.S., but that'll be a distant memory by the time we get into January, especially the second and third weeks. But you can see some of that cold air beginning to advance south, where this is not brutally cold. This is actually pretty close to average, but it is in fact coming. And as we get through the rest of the holiday here tomorrow, we are going to see liquid precipitation going over to snow in some places. Now, that's not the big cold outbreak that's coming. We've got waves of that actually coming here over the next few weeks. You can see the cold beginning to spill down into Western Canada, and we do have temperatures below zero across parts of British Columbia and farther north and west as well. And right now, no extreme hazards as far as the cold goes, but that is going to change as we get into the new year. We do have winter weather advisories for parts of West Virginia and a winter storm warning across the mountains of West Virginia and Western Maryland that has done pretty well so far this winter, and winter storm watches across the North Country here, as well as over portions of Oregon here. Now, take a look at this storm system we have right now. There's actually a pretty well-defined spin over the Ohio Valley right now, and as that moves east, there's a slim chance for some severe weather for the rest of today. Not a big severe weather outbreak, nothing like what we saw here over this past weekend, but something that could catch you off guard if you're not prepared for it. Now, that's going to move pretty quickly by, and then we are going to start to see more unsettled weather digging farther to the south here as this big trough moves in. And what's going to happen is a big dome of cold is going to advance off to the south and east. It's going to take a little bit of time to do that, but over time, we are going to see that. Now, currently, you can see where the radar's got rain falling, and we do have actually a couple of severe thunderstorm warnings as of 2:20 in the afternoon Eastern time, one northeast of Charleston and one extending into Monongalia County here in West Virginia and over southwestern PA near Washington, just to the south of Pittsburgh. So right now, no tornado threat, but we do have a little bit of severe weather. And you can see here, there is a marginal risk for severe weather that extends from eastern Kentucky across the mid-Ohio Valley, all the way through Virginia to the Delmarva and even to the Philly area and the lower Delaware Valley and South Jersey. Not a big outbreak, nothing like a few days ago, but there is a slim chance for a weaker tornado across the mid-Ohio Valley as well as across the Delmarva, Chesapeake Bay area here later this afternoon into the night tonight. A little bit of a tornado potential just due to the wind shear here, but this is not going to be much of a big tornado outbreak or anything like that. In fact, maybe just briefly gusty winds and some hail. You can see, yes, there's wind shear. You can see the indices indicate something around the Hampton Roads area, so we do need to be watching that. There is fast wind flow that is moving from west to east here, kind of an 80 to 90 knot mid-level jet streak, but it's going to move through very quickly here, and not a lot of moisture in place for this. Certainly not the same setup as what we saw here a few weeks ago. Or a few weeks ago, feels like a few weeks ago, a few days ago here over the weekend. So we are pretty much going to see that and then things quieting down for the northern two-thirds of the country when it comes to severe weather. Down south, we could have a little bit more here next week. Here's a look at what's moving into the west here. Lots of rain coming, especially late this week and into the weekend. Over the Pac Northwest. The fire hose is on here. This isn't going to be the biggest rain we've had over the winter, but it will be significant enough, and there will be heavy snow as well across the mountains here. You'll see rain will move on shore in time for New Year's Eve here before midnight over western Oregon, snow in the mountains, and that rain moves into Seattle right around midnight local time, then spreads east. Then the next wave is farther down the coast into places like Bend and North Bend and Bandon and all the way down to Eureka and maybe even close to the Bay Area here later tomorrow into tomorrow night. Then it gets really wet in western Oregon and southwestern Washington when we get into early in the morning on Thursday, as a lot of you are maybe heading back to work. Certainly wet weather expected there. So get ready for that. We are going to move this along here and talk about what's going on across the rest of the eastern part of the country here. Rain falling with this storm system now, changing over to wet snow across eastern Indiana, northwest Ohio, and Michigan. I will pan over to that in a little bit. You can see some individual cells here this evening. So Times Square, we're looking at locally 8, 9 o'clock, maybe some bursts of heavy rain, maybe even a lightning strike or two, and another round coming through right at midnight. So it's likely going to be wet for that ball drop in Times Square. But by the time that moves out overnight, getting much cooler as you see the wraparound snow here across parts of the Appalachians, the Allegheny Plateau, and that continues into Wednesday. There'll be another wave coming in. That big storm I talked about moving into the northwest will bring some light to moderate snow eastward here Thursday night into Friday over the lower Great Lakes, and I will zoom into that in just a second to give you an idea of how much will fall. Here's a look at the northeast. And you can see the rain this afternoon, just a bit of a line that we do need to keep an eye on here over eastern PA, maybe a little bit of hail with some of that. Also going to keep an eye on this action that's coming across eastern parts of West Virginia into western Maryland, southwestern PA. So 2 waves here, and then that moves up into New England overnight tonight. So it should be dry at midnight in Boston, but then getting wet overnight. And then that rain will lift out of the area by tomorrow afternoon, where as it moves farther inland, we are going to see that change over to wet snow, maybe heavy wet snow across northern parts of Maine and the north country of New England and upstate New York, and even off of Lake Erie as well. Now, it's not really a lake effect setup, but it is one that we need to watch. As we move into tomorrow night here, the first night of January, we still have some backlash snow falling. We may even get some flurries all the way down into the Connecticut River Valley, the Hudson River Valley, but I'm not expecting too much near the I-95 corridor at this time. And then the system finally pulls away Thursday night into Friday morning, where Canada will pick up a little bit of additional snow. Here is what the dam is showing as far as potential snowfall. And it obviously starts on the backside here over the eastern Great Lakes and the mountains here. Locally, perhaps close to a foot may fall. Then you'll see numbers pick up pretty substantially later tomorrow and tomorrow night across Maine, Vermont, upstate New York. Amounts, generally speaking, could be as much as 6 to 12 inches. I know the model shows more in the mountains. That's certainly a possibility. And pretty good snowfall, but not for the big cities of the Northeast. We're not to that point just yet. It's still too warm for that. Now, over time, that is likely to change. We can't get super specific this far out, but we do see the signal here in the weather world for cold air in place for the majority of the month of January and even into the first week of February. The Arctic oscillation is negative. That indicates the cold coming into this part of the country and this part of the world. The NAO is negative as well, meaning there's a block across Greenland allowing cold to come in behind it into the eastern U.S. It may try to go positive here by the time we get to the latter part of the month of January, but it's pretty negative over the next 3 to 4 weeks. And as it's transitioning into positive here, that's something I like to watch for a signal, maybe for a major East Coast storm. Just a signal at this point, not a guarantee. But the timeline on that is going to be from about the 17th of January to about the 25th. We could certainly see a storm between now and then, but that is probably at this point maybe our best window for something like that to happen. Now, in the South, you're obviously getting cold, but that doesn't always mean snow, right? We have seen a lot of misses where I live here in Raleigh. It hasn't snowed in a few winters. Now, the PNA being positive, though, does certainly up our chances, but it's no guarantee. So right now, there's a signal, but there's really nothing more at this point. We've seen many models showing threats here and there, but all kinds of timing changes, all kinds of differences in what potentially can happen. And those of you that have grown up in the South, myself included, know that snow forecasts really don't get into that definite phase until we get to maybe within a couple of days. There's never a guarantee until we see the signal run after run within maybe 48 to 60 hours. So right now, no guarantees, but the cold certainly is a guarantee. There's no denying that. You can see here, this is the 3rd of January, big trough in the east, ridge in the west, and then the cold continues to reload and just gets worse and worse here for the first full week of January. Look at the 9th and 10th, brutally cold here over the eastern United States. And in the past, we've seen cold waves like this before, but we've seen them go away after just a few days. This time, we don't see that happening. You can see the cold is locked and loaded here through at least the 16th of January and possibly later than that. Now, these are temperature departures from the average. Now, our coldest temperatures typically are the 2nd, 3rd, maybe 4th week of the month of January. Add to that the negative anomalies, that's these blue, darker colors, that we are below those averages. And you can see by the time we get to the first full week of the month of January, many parts of the northern plains could be as much as 15 to 20 degrees below the average, which is already very cold. We see that cold spreading into the east and into the south as well. And in fact, it could actually be worse here when we get to about the 10th or 11th of January. We see departures maybe 20 degrees below average over a 7-day stretch. That means the average of this 1 week of weather is going to be 20 degrees below your average if you're in places like East Kentucky and Eastern Tennessee and the mountains of North Carolina. I definitely feel for those folks. So that is over a 7-day stretch. Individual days could certainly be colder, maybe even record cold, but that is what we're taking for the average. Beyond that, it does remain chilly, but you'll see there is some recovery coming late in the month of January. It's still chilly, but not as extreme. And then even February could still be on the chilly side. Here's a look a little bit closer at the European extended, giving you kind of a day by day, well, I guess a week long here. And you can see, yeah, this is pretty darn cold, and it just remains cold. We recycle the cold, and eventually maybe there's a bit of a thaw coming, but it won't be until the month of February if this is correct. And even in the Northeast, with maybe some snow cover, it may take longer to see that recovery. So good prospects here for winter in the eastern United States, certainly in parts of the South as well. And this is significant. The NOAA and the Climate Prediction Center are talking about this significant pattern change with the risk of high risk of colder than average temperatures that are hazardous from the 9th to the 11th. I know you can't really see this on here. You'll also see there is a slight risk for heavy snow. This is the 7th through the 9th of January. This includes places like Dallas and Little Rock and Jackson and just south of Nashville and even Atlanta. And then that spreads up the East Coast. This area in here, from the Carolinas all the way up the eastern seaboard, is at a slight risk of heavy snow from the 7th to the 11th. Between now and then, there could be a storm as well. And as far as coldest temperatures, again, just a forecast right now, this can still adjust. But we see probably close to a third of the country below zero at some point, and maybe for many days, and for some of us up here. And then as cold as 10 to 20, all the way down to places like Mobile, Pensacola, Baton Rouge, Austin, Texas, Jacksonville, the Outer Banks, and certainly up the Eastern Shore as well, all the way up into Atlantic Canada. So we are talking about, if you draw a line like this entire area here is going to have a freeze, and this entire area is going to have a deep freeze. And there'll be days in here that are pretty darn cold as well. So pretty memorable cold coming here. Let's talk about snow potential, because I know everybody's asking that, and I'd love to have a perfect answer for you, but I'm not that great. But you can see the probability of having an inch of snow falling here is pretty good in the Northeast, away from I-95, pretty good across the West, and then starting to pick up here across parts of the Great Lakes and Midwest by this weekend. As we head into next week, the chances start climbing and dropping farther south into Missouri and Kansas, Virginia, maybe the D.C. area, and everywhere, but it looks like maybe coastal New England and the Deep South. That's through the 7th. Beyond that, you can see, though, Texas, over to the Carolinas, Georgia, northern Mississippi, and Alabama. It's not a great chance, but 10% or more, certainly a better chance we've seen all winter here by the 9th. And again, I like to go with probabilities. I don't like to look at one model that goes nuts and then it's gone the next model run. That doesn't really help anybody out. I like to rather look at the ensembles. These are all the possible ways that the weather could work out. Take that average, look at the percentage, and it shows that we're going to have a pretty good chance for some kind of winter weather anywhere north of this line here, and even a chance farther south, depending on where things are going to end up going. Here's a look at what our snow is going to look like over the next month or so, and you can see definitely better chances here across the Midwest and the Northeast heading into the 10th of January, even some chances farther down into the Deep South, but this is just one model run at this point. And then I had mentioned, remember the 18th of January and on, the Northeast, the Ohio Valley, this is when we could have a bigger storm. But again, details are still awfully poor at trying to predict at this point. We just see that there's definitely more of a signal at that point, and then even more of a signal here towards the end of the month of January. So we've got a lot to watch in the short term. Yep, I just teased you. We see the cold returning here. High pressure builds down from Canada. This is the end of this week. We will see a little bit of snow across the Ohio Valley, not a big storm. Then as we head towards the weekend, we have another storm taking shape over the southern plains. And as that cold air drills in, we are going to see snow likely all the way down into Oklahoma and Missouri, and maybe all the way down to middle Tennessee into the Carolinas or Virginia. Now, how far south this gets still is to be determined, but this is our best chance that we've seen in a while here on the GFS model. Ice potential here as well, and then maybe some severe weather down south when we get to the end of this weekend and early next week. Mississippi, Louisiana, Texas, Alabama, again, same places that had it before. Not a major tornado outbreak, but one we do need to be watching here. So beyond that, the GFS shows disturbance after disturbance coming out of the Gulf here. It showed stuff in Florida again. We don't really know yet, but you can see here definitely better chances farther south than we've seen in a couple of winters. Here's a Canadian model for comparison, and you will see here that the Canadian's a little farther north. In fact, we've got rain in Kentucky versus snow, but it does have the storm. And the timeline on that's going to be Saturday night in the Plains, Sunday in the Mississippi Valley, and then Monday across the Mid-Atlantic and parts of the Southeast. And there's more to come after that. So a little too early to get too into this, but you can see before our storm hits, there is a potential to see a few inches of snow over the Ohio Valley, then chances coming up after that. This is just a blend of the models. Here's the GFS. You see, generally speaking, a few inches of snow this week, and then we get a break, and then here comes the next one, and the GFS is calling for a big one, parts of Kansas and Missouri, the Ozarks in particular, Kentucky, Middle Tennessee, even some snow all the way into the Piedmont of North Carolina and Southern Virginia. And this is just one model, so we can't get too carried away with it. But you'll see after this, there are additional chances coming down into parts of the Southeast, even in Texas here, as we get to the end of the following week here, the 9th or 10th. So, yep, models are showing some storms, but it's too soon to get too specific. Finally, the European shows our first clipper. Then it also has a major storm, but it is on average about 75 to 100 miles farther north with the snow. Instead of having it across Tennessee and the Carolinas and Southern Virginia, this has it into the D.C. area, into West Virginia, the Ohio River Valley, places that just have not seen much snow over the last few winters. So all we have to really do is just stay tuned at this point. It's tough to get too specific right now. I could show you every model in the world here, but I will guarantee you this is going to change about 100 times between now and then. And as I take tomorrow off for New Year's, I hope you all have a great New Year's. I will be back here Thursday once we have a better handle on what's going to happen. And I hope everybody has a safe holiday. A new year is coming, and this is an opportunity for you to hit the reset button. And as a Christian man, I do that through my belief in Jesus Christ. 2 Corinthians 5:17. Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. Old things have passed away. Behold, all things have become new. And that's just the encouragement I want to have for you is that whatever's happened in the past isn't going to matter in the end if you make the decision to follow Christ. It's what's coming eternally, and that is the promise and the hope of an eternal life in heaven. I hope you all have a wonderful New Year's Eve. I'll catch up with you soon. God bless you.